Buffy the Vampire Slayer was initially a mid-season replacement for Savannah. After its explosive success, a second season was ordered, and this time a full 22 episodes. It was instrumental in the fledgling WB network success, and due to this the budget for season 2 was increased hugely. It's hard to find estimates of how much the first season cost, but starting to this one it was increased to $1 million per episode. With the additional length, the team was able to delve further into characters' backstories, have longer character arcs, and get deeper into the core themes of the show. The biggest focus for this year round was on romance. While it played a small part in Season 1, and this year every character has their own arc, involving fairly disparate trials and tribulations. With the new year came new villains as well, with Spike and Drusilla taking center stage, and a much more emotional big bag than the Master. Buffy herself definitely went through the most changes throughout the season. She was forced to deal with love and loss and the responsibilities of being a Slayer, as well as the knowledge that her parental figures are fallible human creatures. Her most important relationship is of course the romantic one with Angel. While it's rocky at first, due to Angel having to come to terms with human emotions like jealousy and being vulnerable, and Buffy learning how to give herself into a relationship without falling in, it becomes one of the most stable and most consistent parts of Buffy's life. She struggles with school, demons, authority figures, but he is always there to act as a sounding board and to offer advice and assistance. That is until one fateful night, after an apocalypse has come to town again, the pair have to retreat back to their home through the pouring rain. Here, they consummate the relationship, which unfortunately causes the curse a gypsy clan has put on him to trigger, relieving him of his soul. After that, he is no longer her Angel, but Angelus, an inhuman monster who spends much of the rest of the season tormenting the Scooby Gang. It is of course a metaphor for a common experience, that after having sex, things changed. While their dynamic has changed, there is one common theme pounded in over and over, that they still love each other. Almost every action that Angelus does is to get her attention, to taunt her, or destroy something else she cares about. Again, an analogy for real life. Even if someone does terrible things, you can't just choose to stop loving them. This is stated explicitly, and I only have eyes for you. At the start of the season, she is still dealing with trauma from dying, and is a prelude for the coming events. She puts on a brave face, and loses herself in her work, that is, slaying. She isn't able to take the time to sit down and talk about her feelings, because it will overwhelm her. Facing that reality is too much. Eventually, she is able to fall into Angel's arms and let go. The same strategy doesn't work though when it's Angel himself that's the problem. And so the last half of the season is just one blow after another until she can't take it, and so she leaves Sunnydale and the responsibilities of being a Slayer. Buffy frequently jokes about how being a Slayer is a job to her, something the new introduction, Kendra, comments on. For her, the Watchers Council, and the wider supernatural world, is not just work, it's a sacred duty. Buffy, however, is from a new generation, and defies the rules of the old world. This is not just because she's a rebellious teenager though. The structure around the Slayer is thousands of years old, and is outdated. She brings new ideas like having a life, friends, love, all of which gives her power beyond just being a mindless killing machine. She doesn't love the work, but she knows she is the only one who can do it, which fits into another theme of the season, isolation versus connection. While early on Buffy is shown doing her slaying entirely alone, she is now joined on these relatively mundane tasks by Xander, Giles, or Willow. She uses her friend as resources to help shoulder the burden. They of course also function as the research team, helping her figure out exactly what wire to cut. In the end though, she is the one with superpowers and has to deal out most of the actual violence. In the finale, Angelus asks her the question, no weapons, no friends, no hope. Take all that away and what's left? She answers simply, me. While her relationships give her strength, the whole season is about her not relying on them and building up inner strength. She comments that she still wants to go running to Angel every time something happens, but at this point he is gone, and Angelus has taken his place. The message is one of balance, allowing others to help build, but not allowing them to take what they've created. The same message is repeated when her two parental figures, Joyce and Giles, are shown to be imperfect people. Giles has his backstory revealed in the Dark Age, with hints in Halloween. It turns out the straight-laced librarian had the same rebellious attitude as Buffy in his youth, raising demons to get high off their power and hanging out with chaos mages. He betrays her trust and isolates himself, believing his issues to be his and his alone. This almost causes several deaths and a huge rift between him and his romantic partner, Miss Calendar. His past indiscretions are nothing compared to his suicidal attack on Angelus. In passion, Giles tries to fight the vampire alone, bringing fire and a crossbow. He is swiftly defeated and almost killed before Buffy is forced to rescue him, allowing the demon to escape. She is devastated by this, crying and holding him, saying, "You can't leave me, I can't do this alone." Giles was another one of her rocks, and he let himself be controlled by his emotions. Joyce similarly falls into selfishness in the finale, becoming. While she has been absent for much of the season, and the show as a whole really, here she is finally forced to confront the idea that her daughter is a slayer. Vampires are real, and Buffy has to go and save the world. While it is a lot to be heaped on her at one time, she's unable to deal with the reality of it, like mother, like daughter. She tries to hold Buffy, refusing to let her go, and after she is forced to, she demands that, "You walk out of this house, don't even think of coming back." Buffy has been deceitful to her mother in the name of protecting her. In her reaction to this revelation, it seems like Buffy was right. Her house, her home, has now been taken from her by the one person who is supposed to always be by her side. It really is a season of loss for Buffy, and coming to terms with death, heartbreak, and isolation. Willow, on the other hand, had quite a positive year. While she was a fairly passive character in the first season, here she is given the opportunity to grow and take charge of her life. This begins in Reptile Boy, but continues in Halloween, Dark Age, and Phases. In addition, like all other characters, she has her own romantic arc. Initially her continued obsession with Xander, but moving into a real relationship with Oz. It is an extension of what Buffy told her in the pilot, Carpe Diem, something she repeats to Buffy, who mistakes it for Fish of the Day, but the thought is there. In a number of episodes, she is the one to tell people to sit down and shut up, especially in emotional manners. She chides Angel and Giles for putting too much pressure on the Slayer, makes sure Buffy gets her alone time and innocence, and in the finale, she offers her teaching voice to help Buffy study. That's not to say her entire character is gone. She still exhibits the same anxieties and awkwardness, but is able to take control of it more. She says, "I crumble under pressure," but we see time and time again that's not true. She shoots a rampaging werewolf with a tranq gun, or completes a ritual spell from a hospital bed. When the pressure mounts, she's always there to help the people she cares about. While this doesn't hold up the same for later seasons, here Willow is basically pure and good. For the first few episodes of the season, the same dynamic continues. Willow lusts after Xander, praying he'll notice her, and Xander does the same to Buffy, although he is significantly less subtle about it. Luckily, both are able to largely get over their hang-ups. Willow in the episode Ink and Mummy Girl, which introduces Oz, first in the background. He has a line or two in each episode before they're able to spend more time together in What's My Line, where he's put in mortal danger, a requirement to be close to the Scooby Gang. The first time she asked him to kiss her is out of jealousy, highlighting some of the negative traits that come with teenage romance. But it improves and becomes a loving, innocent relationship. While there are storm clouds, in this season the biggest struggle they have is Oz taking his time and then becoming a werewolf. Unfortunately, Green was only contracted for 10 episodes of the season, so he tends to disappear in the latter half without notice. The other element introduced for Willow is witchcraft. In I Only Have Eyes for You, she decides to do an exorcism. As Giles is busy dealing with emotional baggage, she has to do it on her own. It doesn't go well, mostly because of incomplete knowledge, but the roots are established. Then in the finale, she completes a spell, re-souling Angel. It's made sure the audience knows that dealing with magic is dangerous, Giles stating it outright, and Willow becoming overcome with the forces of magic. These will both have bigger parts to play later, but for now it gives her a role in the Scoobies beyond Computer Girl. Someone still struggling for a place, however, is Xander. While others experience significant growth, he's still largely stuck with the same emotions and themes as before. While his obsession with Buffy dissipates over the season, and he even manages to find a romantic partner in Cordelia, he still makes inappropriate comments and acts incredibly defensive around Buffy. Then there is his hate for Angel. In this season he feels vindicated as Angelus emerges, finally the monster that Xander believed him to be. He even says, "I hated Angel long before you did." The only reason he felt this way was because Angel was cool, and he got to be with Buffy. But Xander hops on his high horse, as he does at every occasion. It's impressive the amount of self-righteous confidence he manages. Given that he's based on Joss Whedon, maybe it's not that surprising. Xander does several incredibly harmful and selfish acts this season. The first is in Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, where he blackmails Amy to cast a love spell for him because Cordelia dumped him. While he's treated as virtuous for not taking advantage of the effectively brainwashed woman, he nearly gets himself and Cordelia killed. The second is again driven by his jealousy of Angel, and that instead of telling Buffy about the spell that might save him, he merely tells her to kick his ass. While it wouldn't have made any difference in the end, from his view, it could have. He preferred Angel dead, out of the way, instead of giving him a chance at redemption. There's this odd divide where the characters don't acknowledge that Angel and Angelus are effectively two different people sharing the same body, and one's crimes aren't the responsibility of the other. Either way, Xander makes the choice for Buffy, and opts not to tell her crucial information because of his own wants. Giles is a big player this season. He gets the omnipresent romance arc with Miss Calendar, but also a significant development in his backstory. He gets to play the part of the father, and is able to get more involved with the action. The big difference between Giles' relationship and the kids is that he goes through all the steps. First they meet, Jenny flirts with him mercilessly before asking him out, and then they have a tidy little story. Giles' past comes to bite him, and almost gets her killed, so she gets distant from him. Then they make up, then it's revealed Jenny had been lying the whole time, and that information almost gets them all killed. Giles then needs space from her, although Buffy ends up being the catalyst for them getting back together, forgiving Jenny, at least somewhat, for her role in everything that happened. It seems like they might finally get a happy ending, and then she is killed by the very monster she helped unleash. Love and death, all intertwined. It's definitely a speedrun of development, but it works well. After all, both characters are adults, so they don't have to deal with the typical teenage drama. The issues they encounter are significant, but they deal with it in emotionally intelligent ways. Ultimately though, no one on Buffy is allowed to be happy for long, and in a way that sort of mirrors Buffy's relationship, it's cut tragically short. It serves to highlight a new side of Giles, revealing a passion that's very different from his typical bookish demeanor. Another side shown is his wild side in the Dark Age. While he has been knowledgeable on magic before, it was assumed to be in his role as a Watcher, the guy who knows stuff. Instead, it's a remnant from his past, and is basically a drug metaphor here, something that will come back frequently in later seasons. His old colleagues have all OD'd on it, and now he has to deal with it, alongside perennial troublemaker Ethan Rayne. Ethan serves as a good foil to him, someone with the same sort of knowledge, but no moral compass. Another element that comes out more and more is his fatherly devotion to Buffy. This is especially present in Surprise, where he insists that Buffy have a nice birthday party, despite apocalypse building up around them. In Lie to Me, he offers a shoulder to lean on after terrible personal tragedy, and he's there to offer advice, whether it's taken or not. Then after Miss Calendar hurts Buffy, he refuses to engage with her despite his personal feelings, understanding that Buffy's pain is more important than his fulfillment. It's also a season of mistakes for Giles, though. He isolates himself completely in the Dark Age, and I Only Have Eyes for You, refusing to see the big picture in ways that get people hurt. This is driven by a desire to make up for his own mistakes, which could be looked at as selfless, but he ignores that it affects everyone around him, and that he's the adult and needs to be there, so ends up selfish. He also gives into his passions after warning Buffy to be careful, and to avoid emotional outbursts, almost getting himself killed. It's a very human response, and shows that even the best people can be pushed too far. And rounding out the original season's main cast is Angel. This season, especially the first part of the finale, explores his backstory much more, showing the audience crimes that were only vaguely referred to in the past. The primary purpose with this is to show how evil vampires can be, and to reassure the audience that it's okay for Angelus to die. After spending 1.5 seasons getting to know him, and so much focus on the relationship with Buffy, it's natural for people to empathize with them, to want him back. By showing these depths, it makes it easier to root against him. Before all that happens though, we have an insult Angel acting very human. He's jealous of Xander and shows the exact same inadequacies you'd expect of the rest of the teenage cast. He just happens to be a few hundred years older. This is partially explained by spending 100 or so years nearly dead, subsisting on vermin. Either way, he loses a lot of the cool guy mystique that surrounded him in Season 1, and becomes a more vibrant character. He's still brooding, but is allowed to have a bit more fun. Obviously, we see him almost entirely through Buffy's eyes and her relationship with him. It takes a bit to get going, but after that there are numerous scenes with the two together. As the kids say, it gets hot and heavy. Unfortunately, this goes a bit too far in surprise, and there is the turn. They have sex, and Angel loses his soul to a very poorly thought out gypsy curse, becoming Angelus again. He then becomes the big bad for the rest of the season, the most emotionally resonant of all 7. He knows Buffy, so is able to play her weaknesses, terrorize her friends, and even pick off a few. Throughout all of it though, he's one core weakness. He loves Buffy. He loves her so much that he wants to do the same thing he did to Drusilla, and drive her mad. He has numerous opportunities to just kill her, but opts not to, instead preferring to taunt and torture those around her. A lot of other seasons have this problem where they could kill Buffy, but don't, because she's the main character. This helps avert that. At the end of the season, he is made vulnerable due to magic, and is unable to deal with the situation of appearing weak in front of someone he loves, so he decides to end the world. One could say it's the ultimate power move, sending the whole world to hell just to get one girl. Angel as a character is not that interesting. He's relatively generic, and serves an expository role far too often. Even his relationship with Buffy, while it has some depth, doesn't reach the same level as others do because of his nature. Being a vampire, he can't get involved with so much of her life or the rest of the cast. As a villain, however, he is profoundly more involved. Even in episodes he barely appears, phases, killed by death, he still shows up, does a bit of creeping, then disappears, to remind the audience that he's always in Buffy's mind, just as she always is in his. There's some profoundly creepy imagery as well. In Passions, there's a great buildup of paper. It starts with Buffy herself. She finds a sketched image of her sleeping, placed there by someone who she once would have been happy to share a bed with, but now he is a murderous stalker. After that, Willow receives an envelope of the same color with her dead fish stringed up. Next is an image of Buffy's mom, followed by a scene where Angelus confronts her, seemingly mad with grief. That is by far the best show of acting from Boreanaz, with increasing intensity as the scene goes on. Then Giles finds 2 final pieces of paper, one telling him to come upstairs, even more effective because he hadn't seen the previous messages. The audience has, and they know what's coming. Then in a rule of 3, there's a final sketching of Miss Calendar, dead in her bed. I have to commend the set dresser who did them. They really capture the effort he put in, while still maintaining that bit of amateurness, like it was rushed to finish before they woke. While Angela as a character may get more development next season, Angelus makes this the best, and has many of the most interesting moments. Another rising star this season is Cordelia, who is elevated from guest character bully to main cast. While she spends the majority of the first 5 episodes getting kidnapped or otherwise put in mortal danger, this chills out as the season progresses. She also becomes much more involved with the main gang, asking, "Did you fight any demons this summer?" the first time she sees them. While she claims she doesn't want to get involved, she offers to help more than a few times. She still makes her fair share of jibes and insults, but it's more in line with the rest of the Scoobies, playing along with them rather than talking at them. Then of course there is her relationship with Xander. First formed out of mutual fear, but blossoming into something real, to the point she stands up for him in front of her friends, even though he just cast a love spell that almost got them both killed. She certainly feels some kind of way after learning he did it for her. Finally, we have the big bads for the season. Or at least, most of them. Spike and Drusilla, a pair of vampires that are in love. A sharp contrast from the Power Rangers villain that was the Master. They're significantly more human and emotional. They are 2 characters completely ruled by their passions, a key theme for the season. Getting a bit Freudian, they represent the id, hedonistic, and entirely focused on wants, with no care for long-term consequences. This is shown best in Spike's first episode, School Hard. He arrives in Sunnydale by literally destroying the welcome sign, and quickly establishes who he is. Unlike most vampires, he has a sense of humor, and seems to actually enjoy being a demon. He taunts the followers of the Anointed One, a child vampire who is set up as the next big thing. Immediately after, he launches an attack days before some mystical nonsense was supposed to give them an advantage over the Slayer, and is defeated soundly. Despite this, he seems overjoyed, and murders the Anointed One, proclaiming himself the new power in town. Drusilla certainly has many of the same characteristics, acting rashly and out of emotion, but all projected through a few different lenses. For the first half of the season, she is weakened, having been nearly killed by a mob in Prague. After recovering, she is able to hunt again, but is no less insane. The cause of the madness is Angelus, who took everything from her before turning her into a vampire. That, combined with prophetic visions, means she dominates almost every scene she is in, often spouting nonsense, but with such conviction that it sounds convincing. There are parallels between the pair and Buffy. While she's not controlled by her emotions, she still has to battle with them, especially concerning Angel. Spike shares her confidence, knack for taunts, and tendency to rush into things. Drusilla shares the same presence and emotional core, and both are subject to prescient dreams, which at one point intersect, just like a Nightmare on Elm Street. Both characters back out once Angelus arrives, however, becoming much less involved in direct confrontation with the Scoobies. While they offer commentary and occasional scraps, it's mostly thematic resonance, rather than a direct effect. That's it for the characters, and it's important to note the common themes between the cast. The first and foremost is relationships, primarily romantic ones. The season has them in a few different stages. Spike and Drusilla's is the longest lasting, but once Angelus enters the picture, it becomes tainted and messy. There's a mature adult relationship between Giles and Jenny that goes through all the stages of grief. Then Buffy's relationship with Angel is amazing until it crashes and burns. Finally, we have the two that are relatively stable, at least for now, with Xander and Cordelia and Willow and Oz. As a sub-theme of that, we have passions. Elucidated on most in the episode of the same name, it's also a recurring motif. Many of the villains are slave to it, or to other people's desires. This is seen in Some Assembly Required, Ink and Mummy Girl, and The Dark Age. Then in Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, we see the literal case where a love spell has caused the whole town to go mad with lust. It's impressive how thematically consistent the season is with this, with so many Monster of the Week villains offering a different take on the theme. Of course, there are also the non-romantic relationships as well. Buffy grows closer to Giles, and he in turn acts as a better father than she ever had. Willow and Xander grow close over the summer, but drift apart, and it blows up when he is caught with Cordelia. Of course, they still have to work together, so eventually they repair the divide, but it's yet another consequence of giving in to desires. Another recurring element is that of the characters standing up for themselves, and what is right. Willow has the strongest arc here, as she was the meekest coming into the season, but all the characters have moments where they choose between what is easy and what is important. Buffy has hers in Lie to Me, Cordelia in Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, Giles in The Dark Age, or Xander in, well, Go Fish, I guess. On to the individual episodes. Overall as a season, the average is fairly good. It's certainly lower in the first half, with some of the Monster of the Week episodes lacking in a few departments, but almost all of them still contribute to the overall story or character growth. There are only two that can be pinpointed as superfluous, and only one that should be skipped. Ink and Mummy Girl is the first, and Go Fish is the latter. The season starts very strong with When She Was Bad. It establishes early themes with a cold open featuring Willow and Xander almost kissing, and then Principal Snyder had a rant about how people are slave to their emotions. Follow that up with Buffy still dealing with the trauma of dying, and how despite all her efforts to avoid dealing with it, she eventually has to confront the source, in this case smashing the Master's bones. There's also some comments about slaying is her job, and that she has to do it because no one else can, another central point. While it's not the most in-depth articulation of themes, the effects of trauma and depression are dealt with more in later seasons. It's a good mini look at them. It has everything a pilot should do, shows off the greater production value, including an actual graveyard set instead of the real thing, establishes the core themes of the season, and delivers a bit of action and some drama. 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is a Monster of the Week episode, but one of the stronger ones of the season. Part of that is how thematically strong the episode is. The opening scene is about Angel and Buffy's romance. Next is Jenny's and Giles, and then the bad guys of the episode are introduced. It turns out that the whole Frankenstein plot is due to a need for love from a zombie brother, a nice twist at the end of the second act. It's another take on the effects of death on somebody, continuing on from the themes of the last episode. There's some good comedy in the latter part as well, and some very choice quotes with some of the season. You promised me I wouldn't have to be alone. People want the dream, want what they can't have. Unfortunately, the ending is a bit anticlimactic. After a small action scene, the building burns down, and then it cuts away. Overall, though, it's a solid take on the Bride of Frankenstein, and rates 3.5 out of 5. Interestingly enough, it's one of a few different Universal monsters that show up. In Season 1, there was the Invisible Woman, and this season starts with Frankenstein, yes I know it's the monster, a mummy, werewolf, and creature from the Black Lagoon. The only major one missing is Dr. Jackal, which is seen next season. These films feature gothic overtones, romance, and very human characters, so it's not a surprise to see them repurposed for the show. School Hard is next, and this is the introduction to the villains, Spike and Drusilla. The first scene shows everything the audience needs to know about them, with little to no exposition. The first half is more comedic, with some emphasis on continuing the themes. A few quotes: "I have a job," and "You must fight alone." Then a little past the halfway point, the vampires assault the school. This is the first time they've really impacted Buffy's normal life, and it brings a good deal of suspense, as now it's her mother in danger. There's some good exposition about Angel here, as the build-up to his turn requires the audience to know what he was like before he got a soul. There's also a great bit of visual humor here, as an axe chops into the missing leg on a poster, and then the same axe thwaps Spike on the back of the head, as Joyce almost quotes Alien. The ending has a slight surprise as well, with Spike murdering the Anointed One, who for all intents and purposes is still a kid. Overall, a fantastic episode that is only marred by a slightly slow first half, 4.5 out of 5. Next, however, there are a few stinkers is a bit harsh, but average episodes. Both Inca Mummy Girl and Reptile Boy deal with the same sort of themes as before, but with less subtlety. Being in a relationship with a mummy literally drains life, and the frat guys in Reptile Boy treat women like objects to be sacrificed. The actual effects in both episodes are fairly solid, which can't be said of the CGI in other instances. Neither stands out in a particular way. They're both 2 stars. Halloween is next, and it's a fairly fun romp. It's mostly a Willow-focused episode, and at first she hides behind a ghost costume, but circumstances force her to come out and take action. Also a fun note is the rainbow straps on her backpack, relevant to her actually coming out in Season 4. Overall though, the episode is a fun subversion of the normal characters, as the strong are weak and the weak are strong, but it doesn't do anything spectacular. There's a nice bit of Giles' backstory foreshadowing the Dark Age. Overall it lacks a bit in the non-Willow characters, and is 3.5 stars. Lie to Me is one of the few episodes written by Joss Whedon, and it shows. The dialogue is very snappy, with very little empty space. The characters are also quite quippy, especially the new villain, Ford. However, this episode is also the most emotionally resonant of the first half of the season. Ford offers a new element of Buffy's past, getting involved with the wrong sort of people, and in many ways he is her reflection. He chooses to sacrifice a room full of people to make himself immortal, where Buffy knowingly walks into her death multiple times to save an individual, and sometimes the world. This is another episode that expands on the lore of the Buffy universe in a significant way. There is additional backstory for Angel and the group's introduction to Drusilla, but also the concept of Ford's group, a society of normal people who worship vampires, calling them the Lonely Ones. This episode's plot is also very similar to Sins of the Father, a novel released the year after. There are actually dozens of Buffy novels, and most of them are decent reads. Ford makes a great villain, and the personal connection to Buffy makes this much more impactful than the average episode. This is 4 out of 5. Next is Dark Age, the first and one of the few Giles-focused episodes. This introduces his backstory, and then shows how defensive he is, basically claiming since he is responsible, it should only be him that deals with it. This of course backfires, and Buffy has to deal with viewing Giles as a person, not an infallible mentor. There are some great Cordelia moments in the episode, including ignoring the police interviewing Giles due to her own needs and actually offering to help. There are also hints of her future relationship with Xander, although, for the first time relationships take a backseat thematically. Overall it's not as tight as it could be, and some dated CGI hurts, leaving it with 3.5 stars. What's My Line is the first 2-parter in Buffy history, although officially there are only 4 in all 7 seasons. Romances and relationships take a bit of a backseat, as Kendra the Slayer is introduced, and whether slaying is a job or Buffy's life comes into focus. For Kendra, all she knows is being the chosen one. She doesn't have friends or family, as she was trained since birth to be this holy warrior, and in turn is expected to die young. Due to this, Kendra's emotional intelligence is virtually nil, though she spouts off book knowledge at will. But it's not enough to be a single-minded weapon, as she learns when she embraces feelings like anger in her fighting, getting her the upper hand versus the villain of these 2 episodes, the Order of Taraka. This is the first time since the Master that Buffy has been told to run and hide rather than fight. They also add a sense of paranoia, as most of the time the things that she fights hide in the dark, at night, but these could be anywhere, anytime. It fits into the progression of the season where Buffy is forced to be wary, even from those close to her. There are a few interesting bits of trivia from these pair of episodes. The first is that Sarah Michelle Gellar was actually extremely proficient in ice skating, although they didn't know it when writing the episode. So it's actually her, rather than a stunt double, in the scenes in the rink. They also wanted to film a very graphic scene when she slits the vampire's throat, but TV wasn't quite ready for that at the time. The last is that because of the worm guy, they used real mealworms, and they had to have a worm handler on set to make sure they were good to the little bugs. Overall, the action in these episodes is a bit of a letdown, especially after all that build-up, but thematically they're fairly solid, and there are a lot of individual parts and bits of dialogue that are great. They also add more lore to the world with Willie's Bar and the Order, which is always a positive thing. 4 out of 5. Next we have a pair of Monster of the Week episodes, and they're just bad, though each in a fairly unique way. 10 is a solid 10 minutes where Buffy thinks she killed a human person, but it turns out he was a robot and fine. That revelation erases all emotional weight of the event, and it feels like a total rug pull. Joyce is also just a terrible mother to Buffy this whole episode, but especially after Ted is killed, it's just pure misery between the two of them. Despite this glaring flaw, there is still some good thematic stuff with loneliness is about the scariest thing in life, and the concept of finding someone, anyone, to make oneself happy. 2 out of 5. Bad Eggs is an invasion of the body snatchers type thing, with little aliens brain-slugging people. Then there's also a pair of cowboy vampires who are brothers. These two plots have no crossover, but for some reason they're both in this one episode. Again, there are some decent themes though. Emphasis on how Buffy doesn't see a proper future for herself, just her relationship with Angel, something she'll have to get over very soon. She also pointedly misses the sex ed class, busy with Angel. The themes keep this quite out of the dumpster, as do the decent creature effects at the end, but it's a bit of a slog. 2 out of 5. Here's the real meat of the season though, with surprise and innocence. It's no accident it's exactly halfway through, and creates the conflict that resonates throughout the rest of the episodes, and basically the entire show. It starts with an amazing dream sequence, highlighting Buffy's biggest fear, that she'll lose Angel. There are definite inspirations from Twin Peaks, and the feel of that show permeates the entire episode. By that I mean a sense of dread, but also romanticism. Lust is a big theme here, and Buffy is quickly losing herself to Angel. Not just being with him in a romantic sense, but she pins all her hopes and dreams in him. It's the kind of destructive love that Angela soon reverses onto her, but for now she is at least able to enjoy the time with him. Willow is also way too into the idea of Buffy having sex, but she represents the innocent part of Buffy that is excited to move on to the next level, or grow up in a way. Giles expresses doubts about the relationship, as he always had, but is not putting a hard line against it. Part of that is he knows Buffy well, and forbidding it may as well be insisting on it. But he also understands that Buffy desires a partner right now, and in some ways, it's good for her. That's the thing, no one is in the wrong here. Not even Jenny, who has her backstory revealed this episode. She is part of a gypsy clan that originally cursed Angelus, but was sent to watch over him, and make sure he doesn't have one moment of pure happiness, because that will break the curse. Bad idea, but magic is very strange in the Buffyverse. There's also the introduction of the Judge, a special kind of MacGuffin. He is yet another apocalypse, but having it personified makes it more interesting than the average ritual, and, as Angelus says, he does look spiffy. Having him come in pieces and showing the strength of an individual arm also adds to the menace once he's put together. That, and him draining the humanity out of people, add some strong hints to what is going to happen. A few other small notes about the episode. It's Oz's first interaction with the supernatural, and it's a great reaction. Fitting very well with his traditional stoicism. The ring that Angel gives to Buffy, that shows the two are connected, is incredibly sweet, and the fact that he still has it on him the rest of the season proves that no matter what, he loves her. The music during Drusilla's party is also fantastic, and builds into a great penultimate scene. Overall, the episode is just fantastic, a perfect 5 out of 5. Innocence is a very solid follow-up, but unfortunately falls a bit into Joss's trap, levity letting down what should be serious moments. It starts with a solid foundation though, letting the audience know that Angel is evil again, murdering the first person he comes across. He then goes to the Judge, and confirms again that there is nothing of Angel left, no humanity, only Angelus. Then in his first interaction with Buffy, he's irredeemably cruel, not just telling but showing that he wants to hurt the characters the audience cares about. All of the Buffy stuff is well done, showing her grief, her pain, her anger. It is a very scary scene when she chokes Miss Calendar on the desk. Has given her super strength, it wouldn't take much to actually kill her. This forms a dark kind of mirror with Angelus's later actions. Buffy's final act, to fight Angelus one-on-one and then be unable to kill him, shows that she is almost there, but still in pain. Losing a relationship is its own kind of grief, and she hasn't really had time to process anything. If anything, she deals with the hurt by diving into her work, slaying, and avoids the actual feelings. In the end, she kicks Angelus in the balls, which has some obvious allegory. The judge is also slain here, introducing the concept of modern technology to a millennia-old demon. Some could see it as a cop-out, giving the emphasis that no weapon forged could destroy him, but it's more of a thematic victory than a physical one. The old ways versus new innovations, the Slayer's past versus Buffy present. The rest of the episode deals with the relationship drama from the other members of the trio. Xander and Cordelia's liaisons are found out, and Willow is not too happy, as she still hasn't gotten over him. Of course, he also still hasn't gotten over Buffy, but that's an ever-present problem with Xander, stuck in his ways. Willow does at least take a stand in this episode, calling bullshit out from others and making her needs known, even if Oz recognizes she only wants to be with him out of jealousy. And he wants to wait until it's out of pure intent, generally just a stand-up guy. The non-Buffy parts of the episode don't tie in as well as they could, and what should be a singular fight between Buffy and Angel gets undercut with cutaways, leaving it a little less focused than it needed, giving the episode a 4 out of 5. The season has a bit of a pattern to it, and after a couple intense episodes, there are a couple of Monster of the Week ones. First is Phases, which is a fairly solid effort. It starts with a callback to Season 1, and it continues on with a lot of the themes of that season. Inability to control urges, trying to understand what stage a relationship is at, and the secrets people hide. One negative part of the episode is the Hunter character, who could have introduced some grey morality to the situation, but is an asshole and a sexist pig to avoid any complications. Luckily, the Angelus plot hasn't been forgotten, and there is a great scene in the funeral home, with a vampire he turned to send a message to Buffy. He also weirdly cedes a body to the werewolf, not acting as the alpha. It's a bit inconsistent with the rest of his character. Overall, the episode is a bit wishy-washy, but focusing on Oz elevates it, as his reaction to the whole situation provided much-needed and well-paced comedy. 3.5 stars. Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered is next, and is another strong thematic episode. It offers lots of comparisons between relationships, slang versus romantic, Xander and Cordelia and Drusilla and Spike. Both girls are given gifts, a metaphorical heart in Cordelia's case, and a literal one in Drusilla's. Buffy is also dealing with reminders of hers, as the dozen red roses arrive for her. Even when Angelus gives something to Drusilla, his mind is still always on Buffy. The whole episode is very focused on Xander and his willingness to mess with dark magic to effectively mind rape Cordelia. This is especially icky considering he acts as Joss Whedon's stand-in, having very similar lines to what Joss has said during interviews. At the end of the day, he's not even really punished, because he was heroic and didn't take advantage of the girls who were under the influence. It makes the good moments harder to appreciate, like Cordelia still wearing Xander's necklace, or the colors being muted after they break up. There's so much good stuff, but the unfortunate implications are just immense. The initial rating was higher, but thinking on it more, this is 2.5 out of 5. Passion is next, and it's the perfect Buffy episode. It is so crucial to the development of Buffy, Angelus, and Giles. From the first scene, Buffy is distracted enjoying life with her friends and doesn't notice Angelus lurking in the background. He slinks into the shadows, almost as if something was being foreshadowed. Next, it really plays up the horror, with classical shots like the villain just barely being visible in frame. Boreanaz is monologuing the whole time about passion and losing control of emotions, and especially how it controls people. This all fits with the primal nature of vampires, that pure expression of id. The next scene offers a little levity before the darkness of the rest of the episode, with Cordelia obsessing about cleansing her car, and students, including perennial favorite Jonathan, actually going into the library looking for books. Then there was a great scene between Giles and Jenny, showing the pain they both feel. Giles puts Buffy first though, his paternal instincts rising above his own feelings. Jenny still can't let go of the past, even saying her people were hurt the most by Angelus, which seems a bit much. They had one person killed, Drusilla had everything taken from her, twice, and was then turned into a demon. She then drops the L-bomb to try to save the relationship, and due to Buffy's intervention, it works. Then Buffy and her mom have a conversation about themes, a mirror to the earlier one with Giles. Joyce says the cliches, he's changed, not the same guy you fell for. For the first time, Buffy has to let her mother in on her life to try to protect her. Her mom takes it on the chin that Buffy's dating a college guy, and while the actual age difference is a bit greater, that's still a big gap. The whole thing is a great setup for the end of the season, but for now it's just a prelude to the Angela scene with her. In every filmmaking course, they'll mention Alfred Hitchcock's speech about a bomb. In short, two people talking for 5 minutes and then a bomb explodes. Bad. Show the bomb at the start, then there's tension. When Angelus runs into Joyce and starts talking with her, the ticking starts. Over the course of the conversation, he grows more and more frantic, grabbing or falling groceries and throwing them around. He's getting off the whole time as well, enjoying the torment he's putting her through. But it only works because there is real sentiment behind the words. He does pine for Buffy, and he is going mad without her. It's the reason he wants to destroy her so badly, to bring her to his level. Throughout the episode, there is the theme of inviting people in and the pain it can cause. Meeting someone, telling them about yourself, all of that opens up vulnerabilities, extends trust. This is necessary for social connections, but it's difficult and fraught with dangers. Buffy's relationship with Angel, Jenny opening up her heart, even Spike letting Angelus into his home, ruining all that he had with Drusilla. Once someone's let in, it's hard to keep them out, and it's hard to get rid of a bad relationship. In the middle of all of this, the lore of the world is expanded a bit with the first instance of the magic box. It's explained there are still lots of people not in the know who seek out these places. Traditional hippies are weirdos, but then it also doubles as a place with actual magical worth. Then there is the spell that would end the season, putting Angel's soul back. Just as Jenny translates the ritual, Angelus arrives. While the chase scene is predictable, the ending is not, and she is killed, her neck snapped. There's some choice last words here as well, telling her, "This is where you get off." This is the first major character death in the series, and it helps add actual stakes. Now it's possible for anyone to die, and it also ramps up Angelus as a villain. It's not just random NPCs he's been killing, but someone with actual worth. There are so many little lines that allude to what happens next. Giles mentions to Willow he'll bless his apartment tonight. The earlier scene where he promised he would see Jenny tonight. It all leads to a heartbreaking scene, as everything has been set up to be the perfect romantic event, and then poof, gone. The scene where Buffy and Willow find out is almost as bad as the discovery. Angelus admiring his handiwork from outside. Geller gives her all here, telling the audience she blames herself, that everything she has been walking past, trying to avoid, has come crashing down on her. The way she sinks to the ground is just perfect. From then on, Buffy can't just let Angelus live, it's kill or be killed. Giles knows this, and his righteous anger causes him to seek out the vampire and try to slay him. In a repeat from the Dark Age, when things are at their worst, he tries to do them on his own, and again, people get hurt. Here Buffy realizes she can't run to Angel, or Giles, or her friends when things go bad. She only has herself. There's still more to say, but this is one of Buffy's best episodes and the star of the season. It's easily 5 stars, and works on every level. Following up Passions, there's only a single episode break, as the season is running on breakneck pace to the finale. Killed by Death is an interesting diversion. There's a good bit of character development, and further emphasis on how guilty Buffy feels, as she's still patrolling and slaying despite a horrible sickness. It could also be looked at as a commentary on workplace culture, though the episode never really goes there. Cordelia's not the focus of the episode, but has the best lines, including "Tact is just not saying true stuff." She also has a speech about Buffy conjuring up a demon to fight because she can't deal with death, especially at the current moment. Very poignant, and in most universes it would be correct. There are a few misdirects pointing in that direction as well, with suspicious doctors and hushed conversations, but ultimately it is a demon drawn from a fairy tale. There is a great scene with Angelus as he wants to visit the hospital, but Xander stops him. While his whole protector thing is a bit overdone at this point, something Angelus even comments on, it still keeps pounding home the point that he loves Buffy and cares about her. Even if he did get in her room, he wouldn't have killed her anyway, not in a weakened state. That wouldn't fit his master plan. The episode is let down by a bunch of unnecessary backstory that gives Buffy a reason to fight the demon, but it was already going to murder a bunch of children, so the personal angle doesn't really work, and so much time is spent on it. 3.5 stars. I Only Have Eyes for You is the emotional linchpin of this season, and almost more than the finale, it shows off everything the season's been building to. It starts off with a great melancholy soundtrack, and Willow is the one giving Buffy relationship advice. The reversal of roles fits perfectly with how both characters have experienced the year, as Willow's been forced to take action, demand what she needs, and stand up for herself and the people she cares about. Buffy, on the other hand, has been burned over and over for trusting people in her life and is worried about letting her emotions or passion take over. This feeds directly into the plot for the episode, A Murder Due to a Lover's Quarrel. The big theme is that love hurts, especially when there are power dynamics involved. The past just keeps repeating itself, but in different forms, as if past trauma can affect the present and play out in equally destructive ways. Buffy is a lot of things, but it's never been subtle. There are a lot of great effects in the episode, mostly done practically. The ghosts of the past are basically poltergeists, another classic movie monster, and it comes out as mottled arms, snakes, and twisted mirror images. The zombie makeup in particular is extremely well done and fits the tone perfectly, where the type they use in other episodes would have been too over the top. A quote from the episode repeating over and over is that, "You don't just wake up one day and stop loving somebody." This of course applies to Buffy and Angel, who still can't get over each other despite everything that's happened, but also to Giles. His inability to deal with Jenny's death is tied to Buffy's relationship being gone, and while it's a different type of grief, it's equally as powerful. The end of a relationship is always painful, and in this case, from the past, lethal. There are significant parallels between this episode and the last one, as in both, Buffy wants to fight the monster, but Giles wants to research it. In both cases, Giles is wrong, however, or at least misguided. He doesn't believe Buffy about the hospital, and here he can't believe it's not Jenny haunting the school. He hasn't had time to grieve yet, and it shows. The fact that her killer is still out there also haunts him, and by insisting that it's Jenny's ghost, it also gives him some relief. If it is her, he'll be able to give her peace, salvation, something he was unable to do in life. In effect, Giles is trying to use his Watcher skills, his books, to save the day because he can't forgive himself for her death. The entire episode, and the next season, is about forgiveness, whether people deserve it or it should be extended to them. Eventually he is able to come to terms with it because his kids are in danger. It's Willow's cries for help that snap him out of the madness and into reality. He is then able to accept what has happened, and he tries to guide Buffy in the same way. Ultimately though, she can't forgive herself, at least not yet. It's her fault that Angelus is out there, and she feels that every corpse, every action he has taken is on her. She hasn't served penance, and neither has the ghost, thus neither can be forgiven. He destroyed the one person he loved in a moment of blind passion, and that's not something you forgive, no matter why he did what he did. Again, subtlety is not what the show is about. The whole setup for the episode is about the Sadie Hawkins dance, apparently a real thing in the States, where girls have to ask the guys in a role reversal. Thus, when Buffy heads out for the final confrontation, it's no surprise she takes on the dominant role of the male ghost, and Angelus that of the submissive woman. This is of course itself a reversal, as she was the teacher and he was the student. The question of power in a relationship is a crucial one, and at this moment in time, Buffy has the power, she holds the gun. Despite all of Angelus's taunts, his messages to Buffy, and killing the people she knows, he lost to her in a fight, and he knows he'll lose again. Everything he does is to get her attention, to try to weaken her, because some part of him knows Buffy and knows how strong she is. Their roles in the story make perfect sense according to everything that has happened, and the most ironic part is that he was stronger as Angel. If the same situation happened, he would be the male role, as Buffy relied on him. She drew strength from him, but also needed him, and that's not the case anymore. Angelus is at his weakest in this episode, controlled by outside forces and then shot and supposedly killed. This is what leads directly into the finale, as after being so vulnerable in front of Buffy, he can't take it anymore. His role in the play revealed exactly who he was, a weak, afraid little man who lies that he still doesn't love Buffy. After that, the only option he sees is to end the world. When he escapes from the situation, he growls like an animal, feral, and beyond redemption. Buffy comes to a realization here, that she is finally ready to kill him. Angel is gone, and Angelus is the demon that took his form. Despite this, she is still not ready to forgive herself. Her final line questions why the woman, in this case Angel, was able to forgive the man, Buffy. She never gets an answer, and it's something she really has to experience herself. That's why she has to leave at the end of the finale. She has to learn how to forgive. This episode is another one that has so many themes and levels that it's hard to talk about them all. There are a number of lines about what growing up means and what the difference between kid and an adult is. There's also the discussion about sex and whether that makes someone grown up. Ultimately, I Only Have Eyes for You works on every level and is a perfect 5 stars. Go Fish should be skipped. It's not the worst episode of the show, but it has the worst placement of any episode. Watch it after Ted or Bad Eggs and it's fine. But here, right before the emotional finale of the season and with a perfect episode before and the dramatic conclusion after, it's just awful. Also ignoring all that, it's just a bad Monster of the Week episode with bad acting and a really nasty Rafe reference at the end. 1.5 for decent effects on the fish people, skip this episode. Becoming Part 1 is a solid episode let down by a huge amount of backstory, almost a third of the episode. On the bright side, there is some great acting by the non-Boreanaz actors, especially Drusilla. The two-part is also written by Whedon, which means the dialogue is appropriately snappy and everything moves at a good pace. The apocalyptic event is set up, Willow's magic is set up, and Whistler is introduced, all preparing for the finale, but not that much happens until the final few scenes. These, however, more than make up for it. Buffy confronts Angelus, and her inner conflict is shown perfectly, as she still has hopes that Angel will come back to her. The trap is also well set up, and we finally get to see Drusilla at her full power, murdering a Slayer. There are also actual injuries from the main cast, a broken arm for Xander, and a bookcase falling on Willow. This all creates real tension and stakes, especially since Jenny was killed earlier in the season. Then ending with the real-world authorities catching Buffy, there's so much built up. Ultimately though, that's all it is, and the episode is just 3.5 stars. Part 2, however, delivers on all that has been set up. First we have a cop 100% willing to shoot Buffy, despite her being effectively an unarmed child. After that, the whole episode focuses on isolating Buffy. Obviously coming in this, she has already lost her love, Angel. The last episode with a spell was the final time she thought she had a real chance of getting him back, and that's now gone. She then loses her home and her parent in a terrific scene. Finally, she loses her last tie to life as the little goblin Snyder kicks her out of school. No home, no friends, no love, just her. Aside from Buffy, there's Willow again taking control. The first thing she does when she wakes up is call for Oz rather than Xander, who had been by her side. It continues the theme of the season, that the characters are at the point in their lives where romantic attachments take priority over familial ones. She then opts to continue the spell she tried last episode, repeating the same mistake that Giles did in his youth. While the circumstances may be different, and the intentions are certainly more pure, it's still a dangerous path to walk, and something Willow has to relearn a number of times. Giles has been captured and is tortured, in the same way Angel was earlier this season. He stands up well to it though, still defiant to the end. While telling him that information would end the world, it can easily be seen as a further expression of his love and care for Buffy and others. Though there's also a real fear of him dying, as there have already been 2 major characters killed off. It's only with Spike's intervention that he's saved. Spike has unfortunately been sidelined for much of the season. He was injured in episode 10, and while he has had a small role since, once Angelus was brought back, he's been relegated to Drusilla's bitch. Here though, he teams up with Buffy, arguing the world is worth keeping around, and hell on earth wouldn't be that great. It's a refreshing take on the villain team-up, as he is still decidedly evil, and abandons Buffy when things look bad, content that he got what he needed out of the exchange. Buffy's final fight with Angelus is great, using swords for the first time. Very romantic and classical. He again tries to bring her down with words, taunting her about how she has nothing left, that she has been abandoned by everyone else. The whole season has been building up to this moment though, and she catches the sword and tells him, me. Buffy has gained power from her relationships, but it's always been about her. Her strength. She is the chosen one. That is the turning point of the fight, and soon after, she prepares to go for the killing blow. Then Willow's spell completes, and Angel is back. Disoriented and confused, he stares at Buffy with questioning eyes. It was established last episode that he doesn't remember everything that happened while he was Angelus, at least, not at first. This is crucial, because it answers the question that the audience was going to ask. He falls to the ground, and then into Buffy's arms. Here she takes the lead in the relationship, promising him that it's going to be okay. She tells her she loves him, then she kills him, saving the world in the process. There's a small wrap-up with the injured Scoobies asking about her, wondering what will happen next. She stands apart from them, an outsider looking in. That's the path of the chosen one, apart, even when everything goes right. Then when things go wrong, they go very wrong. In a very real way, Buffy dies. She's reborn next season as Anne, but for now, she's gone, both by circumstances and her own choice. So that's the season. Overall, the high points are the thematic consistency and strength of the inherent messages. Of course, Buffy has always been the high school hell show, but in Season 2 it delves into the nature of toxic relationships, the damage lust can do, and what it means to grow up. The actors are able to understand and develop their characters more, and the greater world is expanded on and explored. The villains are a high point as well, with compelling characters that have arcs the same as the protagonists. The low points are still the Monster of the Week episodes, a few of which seem like unproduced scripts from the first season. The dialogue, while oftentimes quite well done, occasionally falls into quippy cheese that disrupts the excellent drama. There are also a couple of issues with how episodes are presented, the love spell especially, that are problematic at best and glossed over. Still, the positives outweigh the negatives by a huge margin. Season 2 is when the show came to its own and became much more than just a decent idea, with effective emotional beats, interesting plot arcs, and a thematic consistency that rivals the best in all of television. I hope you've enjoyed this review. It has been a while since the last, but this is a more thorough look at the franchise and what I'm going to do with Season 3. Please like and subscribe and have a lovely day.